Dell is, I've just been getting to know her over the last few weeks. She's in our basic principles class, and not only is she beautiful, she's talented and smart as a whip. So she got the whole package. Thank you for sharing with us today. Of course, our amazing and wonderful band who just show up week after week and deal with whatever. It's good. It's good. So today I want to speak a little bit about this idea of spiritual paradox. You see, a paradox is two seeming opposite ideas that are equally true at the same time. And one of the ways you know you're either crazy or spiritually enlightened is when you can hold both of those ideas the same way. So, for example, my favorite is this. It's all about me, and it's not about me. Spiritual truth there, right? Or if you don't like that one, you can go with, it's not about me, it's all about me. You take your pick. You know, they're both equally true at the same time. Because what do we know to be true? Or at least, what do we think to be true? What I believe to be true is that reality is not a fixed thing. There's a reality, and we each have an individualized point of view, an individualized understanding of reality. It is literally true that when you go outside and you see a bird flying through the air, that is not what is happening at all. Your eyes are perceiving impulses, which are then fed to your brain. Your brain interprets those impulses, makes a decision about what that is, and says, oh, I saw a bird. But it may have been a plane. It could have been Superman. Who knows, right? I mean, right? So sometimes, and you've all had this experience, as I have, where we actually think we have perceived something only to find out later that what we thought we perceived was not real. Right? I remember camping one time and spending most of the night in terror because I thought there was a bear outside. And later, the next morning, the tracks were clearly not a bear. It may have been a raccoon, but it was... whatever it was a scary one. I got to say, right? It was, right? Because I interpreted some events in terms of whatever was happening in my own consciousness. So at one level, everything that is happening in our lives is because we perceive it to be so. And so in metaphysics, in science of mind, in this teaching, we begin to, by the premise that we are each responsible for our experience of life. Did you know this? I always say we're always happy about that when it's working. When it's not working, we're looking for somebody to blame. Someone or something to blame, right? Not my fault. I didn't do it, right? But we're saying my experience of life is dependent upon me and not them, not what's out there. This is very liberating teaching, and it's also quite annoying from time to time, depending on what's going on out there. But our power comes when we're willing to see that we are the creative force in our lives. The teaching would tell us that because we live in a universe that is law and order, that is based on spiritual principle, that we are co-creative beings with this divine intelligence. And so we go so far to even say you can influence your life. You can influence the effects of your life. You can influence occurrences in our lives. It is not, although I hate to ever disagree with Ernest Holmes, but it is not that we control conditions in our life. We influence those things. And so when we start getting into this teaching, we're like, wow, it's all about me. And yet, the flip side of that is it's not you. It's not personal. I always say, I didn't create ISIS. right? I don't have that power. I don't create the tornadoes. I don't create all of the things, but the universe is part of that. And so there is sometimes this thing that I watch people go into metaphysics where they get just a little carried away with everything. I'll be responsible for everything that's happening in the world. And that's a bit much. I always say, just start with you. Let's work there. And when we get that working, we'll see where to go from there, right? So that's why I say when we learn that it's about me and it's not about me, we can learn not to take everything personally. We can learn not to take things on that aren't ours to take on. So there's a paradox here between what I have to figure out. And what I have to figure out over and over and over is how what's going on in my life, at whatever level it's going on, how I'm participating in it. My favorite line, many of you have heard, is, what have I done to create, promote, or allow this in my life? Right? Sometimes I'm very an active creator in circumstances in my life. Sometimes I just kind of let it happen, and sometimes, I'm actually promoting it, but whatever. That's where my power comes, when I can look at my life and say, what do I need to learn out of this situation, out of this circumstance? So, as we say, it's all about being and becoming. This is all about unfolding. Today I wanted to look at this idea of spiritual emergency versus spiritual emergence. They're different, So when we are in emergency, what we find is that, in fact, I went to all the trouble to Google this. It took me a while to research. But I thought, what the heck? I could look at what the word means. It says emergency is a serious situation or occurrence that happens unexpectedly and demands immediate action. This is good. When we go to the emergency room, you don't have to go through the lobby. You don't have to check in with 14 people. You don't have to do all that sort of thing. They get you right in because there is a situation that needs your immediate attention. Now, one of the things that I find with spiritual emergency is that sometimes it shows up in our life because there's been spiritual ignorance. I don't know if that's a word, but I like it. Because I've been ignoring the still small voice, right? Well, it's still and small. Funny thing about the still small voice, it will get your attention. It just cranks up the volume, and then all of a sudden we go, oh my God, overnight this thing happened. When we're really honest about it, sometimes we can say, oh, it was leading up to this situation. But spiritual emergency says it's time to act. It's time to get on it. And so we do what's necessary to solve the problem right away. But here's the thing. If we only do that, and we don't go for the larger significance, which is to begin to ask the question, what is trying to emerge through this situation? See, what's trying to emerge? Emerge is a verb, it turns out, and it says to become manifest, to become known, to come into being through evolution. And so here's what I find. Sometimes the noun, emergency, creates the verb, the emergence, if we are willing. I've known people who have had significant change in their life. Let's take, for example, someone who has a heart attack. And when they have a heart attack, they go and they do the things necessary to get the heart fixed, and then they say, that wasn't fun. And maybe I'll make some lifestyle changes to support a healthier heart, right? Some of us want to try and avoid the emergency, and so we're looking at lifestyle as a choice now. To me, this is where wisdom comes from, is we don't wait for the crisis. We listen while the voice is still and small. But no matter what, in our lives, what we find is when emergency happens, it can be a very powerful and transformative tool. This is why I say, I think it is by design that we are here for a limited amount of time. I think it's part of a divine creative plan. That it would be a very, very bad thing if we were immortal. Right? Just think how amazingly old and rigid and set in our ways we get by 50. Think where we'd be by 500, We'd be totally, right? So somehow in this cosmic plan, in this cosmic scene, it's like, okay, you only get to be on Earth so long because then you'll pay attention, right? If you have forever. Now, I'm not convinced that we don't get multiple opportunities, but that's a conversation for another day, right? So when change happens in our life, when a loss happens, when someone dies, when circumstances change and our lives get turned upside down, that becomes this huge opportunity for spiritual emergence. Jokingly saying at the earlier service, that part of how I got to be your minister was because I was such a miserable failure in Sun Valley as a real estate agent. Now I had a lot of help from the economy, I got to say. It wasn't just me, but, and so at one moment I had this moment of clarity that was like, well, what the heck, if you're going to be broke, why not do what you love? Right? Clearly I'm making money here, you can do that. You know how to do that. Be a minister. They pay great money. It's right? But it was a crisis. And the crisis got me back to, all right, Marty, you know why you're here. You figured that out a long time ago. Get on with it. Right? See, isn't it interesting how we can get distracted by our lives? Reading this wonderful book, just looking at it, it's called A Hidden Wholeness, A Journey Towards an Undivided Life. An Undivided Life. I love this. And it's by Parker Palmer, and he's talking about this idea that we all have an authentic self. We might call it our soul. When we are arriving on the planet in this brand new little cute bundle of 8 pounds of flesh, and we wake up. Now, turns out Dell arrives singing, "Hello, I'm here, thank you," right? I don't know how that worked, but this little bundle of light and love that shows up, and we go, oh. You never really see infants with self-esteem issues. Right? They don't go, well, I kind of want to cry, but, what will they think? They just let it rip, It's like, I have a need, meet it. Right? But somewhere along the line, we begin to look around at the world and we say, oh, who I am is not okay. It would be better if I conformed to what I perceive as the way it should be. And maybe you had some help from others around you telling you how it should be. That's no blame here. But we begin to move into this divided self. We have our authentic self that says, I am here. I know I have a divine purpose. I know that life is trying to reveal itself through me. And then more and more we think, I need to conform. I need to change. I need to be more practical. I need to be realistic. All these wonderful things that we say, hide your light. And so as we're doing that, what begins to happen is we have our authentic self, and then we have our facade that we put forward in the world because we believe that would be more lovable and more acceptable. And that works until it no longer works. And then we don't know what the heck to do. Sometimes life is kind enough to us to give us some kind of spiritual crisis or some kind of crisis of some kind to shake us and slap us upside the head and make us say, all right, what is my life about? Why am I here? This is why I say when someone dies in our lives that we love, it does require us to sit down and go, wait a minute, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? What's important? Where am I spending my time and my attention? And so crisis has this wonderful function in our lives, but we want to learn to live so that we're not waiting for crisis, to have the change occur. You see, I realized that I had a pattern in my life that I never made change until some kind of crisis forced me into it. There may be others in the room that are that way. We're not going to segment you in any way, but I'm just saying, right? But then I began to realize that there's another approach, there's another way to do life. You know, I love Stephen Covey's work. I think he's quite brilliant as he certainly helped me in understanding. I took his time management course from him, well, not from him, but his group. And it was a revelation to me. Because what he was saying is, first of all, we don't manage time. Everybody gets 24 hours. It's just the deal, right? So we're not like, oh, I'm going to slow my time down, right? What we realize is we get to manage ourself in the midst of time. But he put forth this amazing concept. This was like revelation. This was like 10 Commandments kind of stuff for me when I saw it for the first time. And he says there's 4 quadrants. There's urgent, there's not urgent, there's important, and there's not important. And so what we want to begin to look at in our lives is, where are we? Because so often what we do is we spend our time in things that appear to be urgent, but they're really not important. So when you begin to step back from that, you go, that became a question. Because, you know, as a minister, sometimes people have crises in their life, or at least they think it's a crisis in their life. And when I was codependent as all get out, then anybody say, I got to talk to you. And I'd be like, okay, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, call. Why not? Right? And then later I learned that I could ask a couple clarifying questions. That not everything was a life crisis changeable moment. So they didn't have to call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. In fact, one of the things I learned, I'm sharing, let's just pull back the curtain here. One of the things I learned was to say, hey, call me tomorrow and we'll set up a time. And I found that about 75% never called. See you next week, how you doing? Oh, great, I figured it out. Without me? What, are you kidding? How can you have spiritual insight and awareness without me? That's just ridiculous. I am your spiritual leader. Right? But sometimes we do that. If we begin to move into that modality that everything's an emergency, everything's urgent, then we're always reacting to life. So it's wise to figure out that in the quadrant, those things that are important and urgent get to be a priority. But we want to work from such a level that we're doing less of urgent and more of important, not waiting for it to become urgent. Turns out it's called planning. Like I said, it was a revelation to me. It was an insightful moment, right? But you see, sometimes I find in our lives that we are living from crisis to crisis. We are waiting, we are in reaction to what is happening to us. And so this whole idea of learning to do what is important, you see, so Marianne Williamson sometimes talks about this idea that, you know, she lived her life and she'd be like, get to a point when it was all falling apart, and she'd say, fall to my knees and pray to God and say, fix this. God, fix it. She's like, cool, I'll take it from here. And then get to a point of crisis again, and then fall to the knees and pray again. And that was a pattern. She said, you know, I finally just realized, what if I just stayed on my knees? Right? What if I just stayed in a state of prayer? See, sometimes when we're learning this is why I'm always emphasizing spiritual practice. You want to do spiritual practice before you have a need to have a spiritual practice. You don't want this to be your first encounter with the divine while all heck is breaking loose around you, right? It's important. It just may not feel urgent yet. I spent the day yesterday with 15 brilliant souls in this community, our spiritual practitioners. And we take that eat, pray, love thing very serious. We were in retreat. We call it retreat, but it's like, let's eat. Let's pray. Let's eat again. Let's love. Let's eat again, right? It seems to be a little weighted in one direction, but it was still very spiritual, I must say. Said, we're going to go a couple hours here without a meal, if anybody needs a drip or something, just to keep you going. What is that about, by the way? Why is it when you get together with other people, it's like food all of a sudden becomes the most important thing? Anyways, so we were together, and I was really just struck. I was reflecting on this last night. I was really struck about how amazing these individuals are. Not any of them are superhuman in any way, but they have each committed to a spiritual path, each committed to embodying an idea, each committing to their own spiritual unfolding. And so for those of you that don't know, in order to become a licensed spiritual practitioner in our community, it really is a 4-year intensive program. And the intensity is not studying Troward, not studying immigrant topics. That's all what we do to keep you busy while we freak you out. The real work is looking at our own consciousness and how we have made up reality. Because again, we all do that. We all make decisions about life, and then we live our lives as if it were true. Isn't that an amazing thing? So as a practitioner, we begin to step back and look at our own consciousness to say, what have I believed to be true? And is this really true? How did I get here? And we do all of that work so that when someone comes to us to be in prayer with us, then we're not buying into their story. We're not saying their story is not true. We're just saying there's a larger story here. You see, here's what I would have you understand. God is bigger than your current reality. And God is even bigger than your current understanding of God. I'm using the God word, if that freaks you out, the divine. Either way, it's all good, right? But we are the limitation to the divine presence. So our work is to keep expanding, to expand our own consciousness, our own belief, to expand our own awareness of this presence and reality in our life. So we spent the day together, and I walked away from that experience just once again going, wow, how blessed am I that I just got to spend an entire day with amazing souls who remind me of who I am. I remind them of who they are, that we're sharing this understanding and awareness of greater possibility. We were in a deeper conversation. And that's powerful for me because I think back to a time when I didn't have those kind of conversations. I didn't have that kind of group in my life. I had people that wanted to talk about ain't it awful, and I wanted to outdo them. Right? Ain't it awful? Well, let me tell you awful, right? I'll give you awful, right? And so we are blessed. I just want you to know, I just want to really take a moment to acknowledge these beautiful souls who show up in service to this community over and over and over. They are wonderful. In fact, we're making a change here. So at the end of, when I usually pray, I'm inviting the practitioners who are available for service to come up with me. And then they'll be up here after the service. So if you are in need of some enlightened thought and prayer, they'll be available to do a quick prayer for you. They're willing to spend up to 3 minutes with you. But at the end of that 3 minutes, you will throw down your cane and you will walk out of here. Guaranteed. No pressure there. Right? We're just opening up a greater possibility. And while I'm just acknowledging people I love and appreciate, we have one Reverend Myrna here in our midst who is not at our practitioner session because she's off busy creating a new ministry, which is the Layton Center for Spiritual Living, which will open May 19th? 17th, the Sunday. It's on a Sunday. So we're excited to support that new work in our community. You see, what I'm reminded of is there are so many people who are seeking to have a different experience of life. They may be moving from one emergency to another. They don't know that they're not at the effect of life. I remember how that felt, and it wasn't good. I thought life just happened to me. I thought my job was just to make the best of it. When I came into this teaching, I began to realize I was the one that was influencing my life, and that I could begin to change inwardly. And as I began to change inwardly, then the outer began to conform to the new belief. See, this is always the hardest thing, isn't it? Because we think if we can just change the thing, then we'll be different. That message is reinforced over and over and over. It's called advertising. And it is a multi-billion-dollar industry that says, you're broken, we can fix it. Try our product. Brush your teeth. Oh, that it would be so easy that all we had to do was brush our teeth and live happily ever after, right? So there's this saying about crisis, and that it is reported, I'm not sure that it's actually true, but it's still good. JFK used this line, so I'll use it, I feel good. That this idea of the Chinese symbol for crisis is two symbols, danger and opportunity. And when we begin to see that, when we begin to understand that crisis comes into our life and it does threaten our way of being, sometimes that's a very good thing. But with it, it brings a new opportunity to engage in life in a different way. We've been talking over and over about this death and resurrection, about this idea that we must die to our old ways of being if we want to have a new experience of life. And some part of us knows that's true. Some of you, I see you nod. I see you, yeah. Amen, brother. Whatever, you're doing whatever, and then you go out into the world and you do whatever you did before. Okay, I'm talking about me now. But, right? Because we don't realize that it really is a change of being. That this idea of repent comes from the word metanoia that says to us we must have a change of heart and mind. That we must... So the danger to our way of being is actually a very good thing. And it can feel like an emergency, and it can feel like, oh my God, I've got to take action. And yes, we've got to take action. But then the deeper question is we want to be looking at really what is trying to emerge. What is being called forth? What is it within me that needs to be known? So Parker talks about this idea of the undivided self. So it's as if we come in wholeness, we make up all this other stuff about who we are and how we should be and all that sort of thing, and then life slaps us upside the head one way or another until we come into a thing of saying, well, wait a minute, who am I? Who am I really? And we move back from that undivided self back to the authentic self. And we begin to allow that inner voice that is the authority, the true authority, the voice of spirit, to call forth our life. It may or may not require change in the outer in order to live a more authentic life. Very often it does. Very often change comes and you say, I am no longer willing to be in that place. I'm going to live from my soul's calling. I'm going to give the gift that I was given to the world. I'm going to share that. There is where the enrichment comes. That's where the authentic life comes. Palmer says this. He says, the divided life may be endemic, but wholeness is always a choice. Once I see my divided or my inauthentic self, I can bring forth my inner and outer worlds back into harmony, back into integrity. In other words, you'll hear me say this all the time. The choice is always, are you going to be an innie or an outie? Right? Are you going to live from the out in or from the inside out? The world would tell you live from the outside. Do these things. Do these 5 things. You've all rejected them. You're here. I know who you are. Right? So there must be another way. Or the other way is to listen to the divine voice within us, to listen to the spirit that is calling forth our particular and unique gift to the world, and to live in harmony with that, to give from that place of awareness and understanding. Rainer Marie Wilke says this: be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart. I love that. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day in the answer. You see, if we're willing to live in that question now, if we're willing to embrace it, we're willing to have that which has been unresolved to be unresolved and to continue to deepen in our spiritual practice, then the day comes when we are living in our wholeness, living in the integrity. We are living from the answer. So many of us approach our life as if there's something wrong with us. Right? All that stuff we made up. Instead of really looking within our heart to say, what's wonderful? What's beautiful? What's true? What's holy? What's pure? And living from that place is where all kinds of new possibilities emerge. I think that's what struck me so much yesterday, leaving our wonderful time together with these amazing spiritual beings, and just all of us feeling uplifted by the encounter of being together in spirit, and thinking, my God, has my life changed. I used to hang out with jerks, and I was one of them. I think I was team captain. I don't know, but I like this better, I gotta say. The question, I think, for all of us is this: am I going to live in spiritual emergency, or am I going to allow spiritual emergence? The Spirit is always seeking to reveal itself. The Spirit is always seeking to make itself known. The Spirit is always wanting to reveal more of itself. This is life itself. And our question is, will we allow that? Will we, as Emerson said, get our bloated nothingness out of the way so that the divine can be revealed? Just know that wherever you are on this journey, you are loved and supported in being fully who you are. Let us pray. As we take this moment and we open our minds and our hearts to the very presence of the divine, we sense and feel and know that there is indeed a divine wisdom, a perfect intelligence at work in this universe. And not only is this divine intelligence at work, it is at work through us and as us. We are not somehow separate from the divine, but rather we live and move and have our being in this divine presence. So let us in this moment open our hearts to the presence of unconditional love. Let us open our minds to the presence of divine wisdom and intelligence. Let us open the very portal of our soul to remember the truth of who we are, to recognize and know that we are each a unique gift of the divine unto itself. And as we do so, we simply feel and allow that restorative presence, that sense of wholeness, that sense of harmony, that sense of peace. We speak the word of truth this day as we enter into this most sacred and holy awareness. For we know that the truth of who we are is wholeness. And so we allow that wholeness to be revealed as health and well-being and vitality. We bear witness to the presence of absolute unconditional love that is the healing and transformative agent of this universal mind. We choose in this moment to love ourselves. We choose in this moment to love others. We choose to fully and freely forgive ourselves and those who we perceive to have harmed us. Through those choices, we see right action taking place. We are willing to release those burdens of the heart and enter into a greater state of awareness and understanding and peace. We remember that we are abundant beings right here and right now, not because of any outer condition, but because we are one with the source and the substance of all that is. As we open our hearts and our minds to allow greater good into our lives, we are gracious givers and generous receivers of the divine. I invite you to breathe deeply into this moment. For this is a moment of new possibility, of new creation, of spiritual emergence. And in this moment, we plant the seed of what we want, what we desire. We allow our soul to speak clearly to us and through us. And we accept our greater good. It is ours for the awareness and the recognition of it. We are told that if we will seek, we will find. That if we will ask, it is given to us. And so we knock and the door is opened and we accept our divine bounty, our divine inheritance. We know beyond measure that we are blessed in every possible way. And because we are blessed, it only makes sense that we would extend a blessing. We begin by blessing this spiritual community with all of its unique and beautiful facets. We know that this is a community that is unfolding in ways of joy and harmony and peace and abundance, that we serve as a light in the world, reminding others of the truth of who they are. We extend that blessing to all of our brothers and sisters around the planet, to the planet itself. We hold that high vision for a planet at peace and for a world that works for all. And as is our custom, we bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith. For we recognize and know there are many pathways to the divine. Rather than argue, we simply bless. That where two or more are gathered, the presence of the I Am is there. And so we celebrate spiritual awareness and spiritual unfolding taking place everywhere. How grateful I am to bear witness to the truth, to speak this word of truth and know that even as this truth is spoken, there is a law of mind operating upon the consciousness we have established, bringing forth the highest good for all. And so it is with a profound sense of joy and a profound sense of gratitude that I simply release this word into the law, knowing that it is so, as together we say, and so it is.